And welcome back to another episode of TWiP Weddings. Once again, my name is Bruce Clark, and I am joined by one of my usual co-hosts, Mr. Brian Caparici. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good. We're both doing better than Robert today. Robert's feeling a little
Yes.
under the weather, so he can't join us today, unfortunately.
Yep.
But that's all right. We will carry the flag in his honor. So this week, we thought it'd be good to sort of have a discussion about off-camera flash. And I think we can both agree, lighting's an integral part of being a wedding photographer. And I would say probably the majority of us, we prefer, if we can, to work with natural light. Agreed?
Yeah, I would say the look of natural light looks more natural, but you can do a lot with off-camera flash to make it look like natural light.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, there are times when, situations where the natural light just isn't cutting it. And
exactly.
you need to rely on artificial light to get the shot. So today, we're going to share how we use off-camera flash on the wedding day. We're going to talk a little bit about the gear that we use, when we use it, and a little bit about how off-camera flash can help separate you from those who rely on working only with natural light. But before we get into the show, of course, we want to remind you how you can participate in the show. We've got a few different ways to interact with us. First off, you can visit the website at thisweekinphoto.com. There you're going to find links to our show and all the other great shows on the This Week in Photo network. And we put up a blog post that goes along with each episode. In that will contain links to everything that we talk about, our picks of the week, all that good stuff. So be sure to visit the blog. If you have a question or if you'd like to suggest a topic we could discuss on a future episode, you can email us. Our email address is twipwed@thisweekinphoto.com. Or if you prefer using social media, you can just add the hashtag TWiPWed to your post, and we'll periodically keep our eye out for those posts. And probably the most active place where people are these days is our Facebook group. So just search for TWiP Weddings or go to facebook.com/groups/TWiPwed and sign up and join our Facebook group. Lots of people in there, lots of good discussions happening there. People are suggesting potential topics for the show and asking questions. And so join us there. Shall you? Or shall we? Shall you? That's
Shall
better.
you?
Shall you?
Join us, please?
Join us, please. Well, without further ado, let's jump into the show then. And like I said at the top here, we're going to be talking about off-camera flash for wedding photographers. And I think you and I both teach off-camera flash, and you mentioned to me that you teach that. I teach that as well. And I think the ability to light basically any situation, at any time is kind of the hallmark of a good photographer.
Yep.
Natural light's great. We all love to work with natural light. But anytime I see photographers specifically marketing themselves as a natural light photographer, I don't know if you think this, Brian, but I automatically think they don't know how to use anything other than natural light. That's kind of my immediate thought. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they're wearing it proudly that they don't want to try something that is a great technique and a great sort of tool to have in your tool belt. And I think that's really what it's got to be looked at, right? Is like, it's just another technique. It's almost like when I see a photographer that has every shot that is very obviously shot at f1.2, it's like, okay, like good for you. You can have shallow depth of field, but that is one tool in the tool belt of a wedding photographer to make great images. And not every image should be shot that way. And I think just similarly, not every shot needs to be natural light. And even if you do need to shoot it, or want it to look like it's natural light, like we said earlier, on a wedding day, you don't know what you're going to get, right? I mean, you could have any situation. You could have rain. You could have overcast. You could have a really dark venue that you're photographing in. And if you want it to look as pleasing as possible, sometimes the natural light just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we've all probably been in situations. I think if you follow a lot of I think one of the issues too is if you look at a lot of blogs and if you look at a lot of the wedding blogs and stuff like that, the majority, I would say, 90% of the photography that's on there is the light, airy, outdoors shot, probably in Southern California at 7 o'clock at night or something, like just before an hour before sunset. It's all the dreamy, light, beautiful, which is, I mean, we'd love to all have that light on our wedding day and be able to work with that. The reality is that very rarely happens. At least I know, at least up here where we live, we end up in dark caves, really darkly lit churches. We have no control. We could be shooting in the middle of July at noon. or we could be shooting in the middle of winter at trying to do, you know, shots at 5 o'clock at, you know, in the evening when the sun's already gone down. So, you know, I think that's where having that, like you say, as a tool in your tool belt definitely is key if you're going to be a professional wedding photographer. I don't know how. I know a few good photographers who can manage. I don't know how they do it, but they manage to work without off-camera flash, and they do amazing work. But for me, I just wouldn't feel comfortable going into a situation not having some lighting with me.
Well, yeah, and again, it's just that idea where you don't have to use it all the time, but just having the knowledge of how to use it in the case that you need it means that you can do the best job for your clients, because if there's not great quality of light, then you can bring that quality of light.
Yep.
So I don't think it's something that's like, if you start using off-camera flash or you learn it, that you have to go and use it on every single wedding.
Yep.
There's many weddings I photograph where just the natural light is perfect for the day, and I have no issues with that. But knowing how to use it then allows me to step up my game at those times during the day or during some wedding days that I need to.
Yeah. So what would you say, kind of on average, if you were to kind of survey all your weddings over the course of a year, what percentage of the day would you say that you pull some form of off-camera flash out of the bag and use on a typical wedding?
I'd say, I mean, not a lot. I would say, well, for me, 100% of receptions are always off-camera flash.
Yep, me too.
And then outside of that, honestly, maybe 5%, like a very small percentage. But yeah, I mean, 100% of the reception, and being that usually my reception coverage is, 30% of the coverage of the day, I guess that would equate to around 35% of my work, I guess you could say, would be off-camera flash.
Yep. Yeah. I would say I'm about the same as you.
Yeah.
We, again, try to work with the natural and available light through most of the day as much as we possibly can. We pull it out 2 times, actually, specifically. Family photos. I make a point of pulling it out just because typically if we're dealing with larger groupings, sometimes we need a little more depth of field, and sometimes it's just with the natural light that we have, it's just not quite enough. So I like to have just that little bit of fill flash just to kind of help pop them off the background a little bit and make sure we've got, then we can shoot at, like you were talking about, people that shoot weddings all at f1.2. Well, that wouldn't work very good if you've got a big group family photo to do. You'd have grandma in the front nicely in focus and everybody else, possibly out of focus. So, that's where a situation where you might need to be shooting at f8, to get everybody in nice, clean focus, right? So we like having that extra flash. So that's, that time. And then obviously receptions is the other time when we will use a lot of off-camera flash, and then sprinkled throughout the day if we want to get sort of creative and try some different things with our couples, that's when we'll pull it out. But I'd say about the same as you, probably about 30.
Well, just as a quick, interesting note, I guess, about that with family photos, because when we're photographing family photos, we've got to be using a much higher f-stop number. In doing so, we're decreasing the separation, right, of the background and the foreground. So we're going to see much more of the background, whether it's a group of trees or a building or whatever it is. And so you lose that separation a little bit. But if you start to introduce off-camera flash now, you can create that separation through flash. So you can still have that really nice, dynamic, really separated look, and still have everybody in focus, as opposed to shooting at, f2 to create the separation, but you lose the focus in that. Yeah,
absolutely. Good point. So I guess we already kind of touched on a little bit, but we talked about sort of what situations would you use off-camera flash specifically? So you mentioned receptions. So I think, we'll come back, and I want to get into detail kind of how you set up and light receptions, but, and I use it at family photos. Any other, would you use it during ceremonies?
No, I won't use it during ceremonies unless it's in like a reception hall and they have their ceremony in the reception hall. So if it's in that, like, a lot of the times here, we've got like some really beautiful venues here where the couple will have their ceremony in one room, and then they'll move on to the next room for the reception and cocktails and that kind of thing. So usually for the ceremony there, I will have an off-camera flash or two. But if it's in a church, if it's outdoors, anything like that, I won't use off-camera flash for, because I don't want it to be intrusive. But if it's in that like reception hall room with like the big fluorescent lights, or like not very flattering light, or a backlit window behind them, then I want to have it in there just to add a bit of punch.
Yeah, we're the same way as well. Like, again, we try to avoid it at all costs when we're in, a place like a church or other venues or outdoors. Again, because we don't want it to be distracting. But There have been one or two situations where we've had to pull it out. There's one church that we shoot in here it looks like it would have a lot of light in it, and you go in and it's dark as a cave.
Right.
And then we had a wedding one time where there was a really bad thunderstorm outside and dark clouds, and so it was basically nighttime outside, and so there was hardly any available light in the church at all, and so we had to pull some flashes out. Otherwise, we would have been shooting at like 12,000 ISO.
Right. I think something else that is maybe just interesting to note for the photographers listening is a lot of the times the assumption is that when there's not the quantity of light, that's when you want to pull out off-camera flash, right? Like you say, well, oh, it's a dark venue, therefore I need off-camera flash. And I think that's always the first assumption for a lot of photographers when they start to learn off-camera flash. But what I've learned over the years, in fact, it's funny because I remember the first workshop, my first introduction to teaching ever in photography was about 7.5 years ago. And the first workshop I ever taught was off-camera flash, because I was doing this, new off-camera flash, which isn't really new, but in our area, everyone was like, oh my gosh, how are you doing that? Right. And I said, it's not really that complicated. So I taught a workshop on it. And that assumption up front is always that when the quantity of light isn't there, use off-camera flash to help you with that. But I also think that there's a lot to be said for the quality of light. So you may have a lot of light in the room, but if it's not very good direction, or if it's a mixed color temperature, that's very weird and awkward. If it's spotty light, like little things like that have to do more with the quality of the light, I think that's just as relevant to look at when we're trying to decide whether or not we want to use off-camera flash or not.
Yeah.
And it's a common misconception that a lot of people think, well, oh, it's a bright room, therefore I don't need off-camera flash. But just because it's bright doesn't mean that it's good quality.
That's true. Yeah. You can have when I'm teaching the class, I always use the example of, you've got the quality versus quantity.
Yeah.
Quantity at high noon in the middle of July is fabulous, but we would all agree that would be the worst time to go out and shoot if you had your choice of times to go out and shoot, right? So I always talk about that quantity versus quality of light. We talk about sunrise and sunset being when the quality of light is always the greatest, right? But that's Mother Nature controlling that. In the case of off-camera flash, you can place that light where you want it, and then you get to control that quality with modifiers and the power and where you place it, and all these types of things lets you control that direction of light.
Yeah, and like a similar example, I'm sure many wedding photographers can relate to the ceremony setup. Like I was mentioning earlier, when we photograph indoors in some venues, they always have this really beautiful wall of windows that they'll use as a backdrop for the couple, right? So everyone's looking into this beautiful wall of windows. So yes, the quantity of light in that scene is very high. There's a ton of light coming in through those windows. But I know that if I were to then expose for the couple who's in front of the windows, they're basically going to get completely whitewashed, which might be good in some situations. And for some images, I may want to do that. But I'm looking more for quality of light, and maybe I want to showcase what's out those windows. For example, in Niagara Falls, a lot of couples get married at this one hotel where they've got this beautiful wall of windows and it overlooks Niagara Falls.
Right.
So if I were to make every image for that couple where the background was completely whitewashed, which is what would happen, they would lose that connection, which is usually the reason they chose that venue in the first place.
Yeah, they could have just got married anywhere with a white wall behind them, and it wouldn't have mattered, right? So
exactly.
That Niagara Falls, I hear it's just the tiny little water. We have that too. Like here, a lot of people get married in the mountains, right? But it's like the Banff Springs Hotel and the Jasper, and they can have some beautiful vistas and some beautiful views out the window. But if you're trying to balance the light, again, you got to make that choice. Do I expose for the people, or do I expose for what's outside? Yeah. Well, if you expose and say, here's beautiful photos of your ceremony, look at the mountains, and isn't it all pretty, but you can't see the couple, they're probably not going to be very happy. And conversely, if you can only see them and not see the beautiful background, right? So that's another situation where off-camera flash kind of takes away the need to compromise. Now you get the best of both worlds. Right. You can expose ambient light for the outside, and then bring the flash in to expose your subjects. Yep. So let me ask you then, what's your gear setup look like? What do you use for your off-camera flash setup? Obviously, you shoot Fuji and Nikon. Yep. Correct? Yep. So what's your gear setup, and is it going to change now that Nikon's released those new SB 5000 wireless flashes?
Are you telling me about something new that I don't know about yet? What
You
is
don't know
that?
about this yet?
No, what is this?
Oh, they
Wait a
just
minute.
announced at CES a new SB 5000, and
No
they're
way.
adding radio
Yes, they are.
into the flashes.
All
About
right.
time they caught up to Canon, who's had it now for
Yeah,
a couple of
yeah.
years.
Wah, wah, wah.
But
Okay.
that's okay. They play this game, right? It's leapfrog. For a long
It
time,
totally
Nikon
is.
sort
Yeah,
of
totally.
dominated and had the superior system. I will
Right.
admit they
Right.
were the kings.
Right.
And then Canon upped their game finally a couple of years ago with the
Right.
600 series.
Yep.
And now
Yeah.
Nikon's come out with the SB 5000. So
All
there you go.
right.
So,
Well, that's something I'm going to have to look into. So my current setup is, yes, I shoot Nikon and Fuji. I use all SB 900s as my flashes.
and they work with both systems?
Well, so by default, no. Like if I were just to take an SB 900 and put it on top of my Fuji, that would not work.
Okay.
But what I use is I use the Cactus V6 triggers.
Okay.
And it's a wireless trigger that basically I put a transmitter on top of the camera. I put a receiver on the flash, and it works all wonderfully. The reason that I like it, and way back in the day, like when I first started, I used Pocket Wizards. And the thing that I found annoying, and I know that they've done a ton of improvements since then, and I've been happy with my Cactuses, so I haven't even investigated it. But in order for me to switch my power settings back when I used the original power, I think it was the +2s, the original.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So in order for me to adjust the power, I'd have to go over to my flash, the off-camera flash, bring it down off the stand, adjust the power, put it back up.
Yeah.
I always found that to be an inconvenience, especially when I'm shooting with 4 off-camera flashes at a reception. So with my Cactus V6s, I can actually control the power of all the flashes off camera right from the trigger that's on top of the camera. So I just create the groups for it, and I say I want this to be a 16th power, I want this to be a 32nd power, and I can adjust it that way. So that's super convenient for me. I'm pretty sure that wow, now I'm drawing a blank. Pocket Wizards.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that Pocket Wizards now have an option that also allows you to do that. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, I guess they have the ones that will do the TTL. So they have the newer ones that came out that support and do the TTL, and then they have something called the zone controller.
Okay.
And then go on top of that. And it was a very, I used that system for a short time.
It's kind of complicated, is it not? A little bit?
It was a little complicated, and what I found on the Canon system was it was also very unreliable.
Right.
It just didn't work some of the times. Like it would fire sometimes, and other times it just wouldn't work. And so I just found it was very unpredictable and unreliable.
Okay.
And then finally Canon released their new speedlights that had the wireless and everything built into them, and you can control it so much easier from directly from your camera, either from a flash, or you can buy a transmitter unit. Right. And you can do it all that way. So there are definitely, and like I say, there's the Cactus, there's Young Meow makes these triggers. There's a whole bunch of triggers now that are on the market that you can get. Pocket Wizard at one time, they were kind of the only game in town. Yep. But then everybody else sort of caught up and improved upon what they had done and made it cheaper. So they lost a lot of ground, I think, in the last few years to other competitors and cheaper products. Let
me ask a question then. Like with Nikon releasing the XB 5000 and with Canon having the 600s, right? That's what you got?
600s,
so they've all got radio triggers built into them, which is why, or a large part of why the entire radio trigger market existed, is because that was never built into the flashes. Now there's still a need for the triggers for studio lights and for pro photos and things like that. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think that market's going to go down for the radio trigger market?
It depends. I think the one thing that's still going for those guys is you could still pick up a Pocket Wizard or Cactus trigger or a Young Now trigger and a manual flash from basically anybody,
right? This is
for a couple $100 and have a kit and be ready to go. Whereas the new Canons and the new Nikon flashes, they're $500-$600 for one flash, and typically you need at least two. Right. Or a combination of a camera and a flash that can talk to each other. So it's not, it's not a cheap investment. For one of those flashes, you could go out and get a manual, like a Young Meow makes a flash that's actually compatible with the Canons. That's for about $300. So you could actually go out and buy a couple of the third-party brands, 3 or 4 of them for the same price that it would cost you to get a Nikon or a Canon flash. So. There's something to be said for the name brand and sticking name brand as well. So it just depends on what your preference is. I have a preference for the name brands. Now, that being said, I recently switched my off-camera flash setup about 2 years ago. and I have Canon 600s. The issue I found with them is they didn't recycle quickly enough, and they just didn't have enough power for me. So I still have them. They're in my bag.
Right.
They occasionally come out if I need. It's usually just if I'm in a situation where I'm putting the flash on camera and just bouncing it. But for the most part now, I have switched my flash system, and I am now shooting with, I'm going to show them. For those who are watching the video, I'm going to show them, but I'll tell you what they are. I'm using these guys now. These are the Godox.
Oh, yeah?
It's the Wistro AD 630. And these are a bare bulb.
Oh, really?
Flash.
That's nice.
Now, these guys run about $400.
Yeah.
Just drop the cover. But they're about 8 times the power of my Canon 600 speedlights.
Oh. So do you have a reflector you put on top of it then?
You can put all kinds of modifiers on this. So I have a softbox that can mount to it.
Right.
I have a bracket that lets me mount and put all my studio softboxes on it.
Okay.
And you can put, there's a reflector, and you can put umbrellas, and there's a bunch of different adapters you can get for these.
So now how do you trigger those then?
So these come, I have a set of triggers that came with these, really inexpensive, like $50.
Okay.
Manual trigger. You plug in, it's a USB, goes on the side. And then there's a little remote that goes on your camera. And then from there, you can control up to, I think, 16 different groups.
So you can control the power from your camera.
Control the power from my camera. So I can just go right in on the trigger and turn them down. It's manual only. There's no TTL.
Yeah,
so it doesn't do any of the TTL business. It's all manual.
Right.
But I find that works fantastic for me. So at any point in time, I can set up 3 or 4 of these and control the power from my camera. I don't have to move.
Right. You know, just as a quick note, maybe we should just mention that, because I'm the same, where I actually never use TTL with my off-camera flash, and maybe something, at least whenever I've taught off-camera flash to photographers, I always encourage them to do that first. Yeah. Because I feel like, and again, I know there's many photographers that do a great job using TTL with off-camera flash. The one off the top of my head already is like DQ Studios.
Yeah.
Dave and Quinn, they do an amazing job with what they do, and I think they use a lot of TTL with what they do.
Yeah.
I always use manual because I know exactly what result I'm going to get. Whereas when you start using off-camera flash with TTL, it's like, well, what is it reading? Is it reading a window thinking it's the flash? Like, there's all kinds of things, and you may not get the results that you're expecting to get. Whereas if you just use manual mode and you say set it to 1/32 power, take a photo, look at it. If it's too bright, then turn the power down.
Yeah,
it's too dark, turn the power up. It's a really easy way to learn off-camera flash, I feel. And then if you want to get into doing it a bit quicker, maybe TTL mode might be a good option. But I also would venture to say, like for me, for example, when I get an off-camera flash out, I can get my exposure really quick using manual mode just because I'm so used to it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. When I teach my classes, I actually I explain what TTL is. And for those who maybe are new to off-camera flash or haven't worked with it a lot before, basically what TTL stands for, and Nikon has their version, and Canon has their version, and Sony has their version, but it's basically through the lens metering. So the camera sends out an initial sort of pre-flash that registers, and it tells the other off-camera flashes, you know, how much light do we need on this scene, and then they fire. The way I equate it to my students is I say it's very much like running your camera in aperture priority, where you're letting the camera make the decisions. In this case, you're letting the flashes kind of make the decisions. And sometimes, it can work really, really well. The TTL systems can work really well. Particularly, I find it works well in situations where the distance between the subject and the light is changing very quickly. Yeah. Where it would be, if they're moving closer to the lights and further away from the lights very rapidly, and it would be difficult for you to keep up with that to change the power and still get the shot, then TTL can be, it can get it right a good number of times. It's probably going to make the odd mistake, but that is a situation where it might be quicker. But if you're in a fairly static situation, like if you're shooting portraits or we're doing family photos, or you've got a reception where it's pretty predictable where the dance is going to happen and everything like that, that's where shooting in manual, like you say, is much more predictable and repeatable results, and I think a lot easier for people to understand. So when I teach, I explain what TTL is. We venture into it a tiny little bit, but it's towards the end once they have a full understanding of how their flashes work in manual mode. Right. So I think that's a key thing. If you're going to start learning off-camera flash, learn how to work them in manual mode first, and then once you're comfortable there, then you can go to TTL. At least then you have an understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
right? And getting random results and getting frustrated, because that's the thing I often hear from students. They say, well, you know, I bought these flashes and I tried using them and I just didn't get any predictable results. So I gave up and went back to natural light.
Right.
All right. And that's why I hear that a lot from my students. So
Right.
I'm sure you hear probably similar.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's I think the biggest hurdle is I think everyone has tried it and they end up not having the success that they want to have with it. Usually either what I've found from two things, one from being technical limitations, like they don't understand, they always try using the infrared receivers built in, and maybe it's not working and they're just like, it's never working. And it's like, well, you have to point the receiver and the transmitter to each other if you're using the infrared, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're using the triggers and already you can hear it, even in our conversation here, it's like, well, there's this trigger and you have to get a transmitter and a cord for this and a USB for this. So you can control the power. And I think people get confused with the technical side of that, which I guess is really just like anything in photography, right? I mean, there's going to be a learning curve, but I think even then, once photographers get the gear set up and it's all talking to each other, they usually try TTL because they feel like it's simpler, and then you're going to get potentially very inconsistent results. Which will then lead them to think they're not doing something right.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming because there's so many options out there now these days. I mean, technology has advanced so much in the last 5 or 6 years in this area of off-camera flash, and there's just so many. There's so many different manufacturers out there now, and making all different kinds of triggers and things. So yeah, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So sometimes you want to just strip it back to the bare basics, right, and get a good feel for the bare basics of what they do. So, okay, so you pack the SB 900s in your bag. That's kind of your typical, and then you've got the Cactus V6 triggers. Like I say, I have the Canon 600s, and then now I've been carrying these Godox AD 360s. The other thing I like about these is they also they take an external battery pack to power them.
That's nice,
so they're not as portable as just say a single speed light, but again, I'm getting 8 times as much power. So because they're so powerful, I don't need to run them very often. I'm running them at, in manual, I'm running them at maybe a 16th or a 32nd power.
Okay.
Still gives me a lot of light, and I can get through 2-3 weddings easily with those without having to charge them back up.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So very powerful, lots of battery power, and just good quality of light too. So they've even replaced, in a lot of cases, my commercial work and whatnot, me dragging my studio lights out on location. Yeah,
I could definitely see that. The other thing I use, just to add to that, because I do use the battery pack for my SB900s, I think it's called the SB8A.
Okay.
Maybe we can throw a link to that in the show notes, but it's just the Nikon battery pack for their flashes.
Right, the external battery pack.
Yeah, the external one. So it takes 6 AA's.
Yeah.
So in total, I have got 10 AA's powering each SB900, and I've never had and I usually fire them off for the entire reception at 1/8 power or 1/16 power.
And so what's the advantage for those who aren't familiar with what that does? What's the advantage to having an external battery pack?
Right. So the advantage is, one, it's going to increase your recycle time, decrease your recycle time. It's going to make it so you can fire off shots quicker.
Right.
So if I'm photographing the entrances at a reception or speeches or dances, if I want to go click, 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 I'm not going to have a problem with the recycle time on that. Whereas if I don't have it, it's like click, and then it's click,
one Mississippi 2.
Yeah, you have to kind of wait. So the battery packs help with that, but also it just helps with the longevity through the evening. So if I'm photographing a reception for 4 hours without the battery packs, it'll start eating away at the battery, and come the end of the night, it's recycling a lot slower, and it's not getting the full power out of it. So with the battery packs, it helps with both of those things.
Yeah. What do you use for batteries? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I use the PowerX. They're 2,700 milliamps. I can have a link to them, actually. I can give you a link if you want. It's just the PowerX AA's. They're low recycle, so I charge them all the night before, and so they don't discharge themselves quickly.
Yeah.
And they're 2,700 milliamps, so they're very powerful to begin with. And I've had great success. I've used them for probably 6 years, the PowerXs. And every couple of years, I usually just recycle all my batteries, because photographing the number of weddings that I do and using the batteries as much as I do, they eventually lose their juice.
Yeah.
So every couple of years, in fact, this year I have to go and get them all replaced. But it's just a good idea. Yeah, it's just a good idea just to kind of recycle them every now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've had to do that with these once. I had one battery that came, I bought a few spares, and one of them came, and it was just a dud. It didn't hold the charge long enough, and I ended up having to replace it, unfortunately. But for my other flashes, I use the Eneloop batteries from Sanyo. No, Panasonic?
I think it's Sanyo.
Sanyo, yes, Sanyo makes the Eneloop batteries.
Okay.
Similar to the PowerX ones. Same. I think they're the 2700 milliamp ones as well, and they're the ones that you can charge up and they won't drain, so you could leave them in your bag
Exactly.
supposedly for a year or more, and they won't lose their power. I'm paranoid about that, so I'm always like,
oh, I would never do that. Yeah,
I like to charge things and make sure everything's charged, because
yeah,
I don't want to show up at a wedding and be like, oh, my batteries aren't working.
No,
so.
I think that the biggest, like the two things, like whenever I see this topic discussed among educators, it's always either the Sanyo Eneloops or the Maha PowerX batteries. Those are the two I always see recommended.
Yeah.
So I would say that you're good to go with either of those.
And I have the Maha charger.
Okay.
So they make a really good battery charger because it can actually condition the batteries. Some chargers. Do you? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, they're good because some chargers, the way they work is you put all your batteries in, and once one battery is fully charged, it basically stops charging. With these Maha chargers, they'll charge each one individually. You can recycle, like what do they call them? Recondition them, right? So they're pretty good chargers to have. So if you're going
and those chargers hold 8 batteries at a time, so you can charge a lot more, a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So I've got, like I said, I've got 4 of them, so I can charge 32 batteries. Like that.
Yeah, and they're not that. They're only like what, $30, maybe.
Yeah, they're not very expensive.
Not very expensive, so they're a good investment if you're doing a lot of this stuff as well. So, the one advantage I will say to the Canon flashes, the Nikon flash, any of those flashes, is they do just take your regular, AA batteries.
Yeah.
So the downside to these ones is I have to have the batteries charged, plugged in, and ready to go. Because if they die, I can't just swap and put AA's in them.
Right.
So if you're doing a lot of destination weddings, you're doing a lot of travel, then that's where your other speedlights might come in. So when we travel or doing anything destination, I end up taking the Canon speedlights just because they're a bit lighter. I know I can put AA's in them, and you can get AA's anywhere in the world pretty much. You don't have to worry so much about that. So it just depends on where you're going and what you're doing, and
totally
all the rest of it. So that's the flashes. What other stuff do you like to incorporate into your off-camera flash? Obviously, stands. Do you have any preferences of stands?
Yeah, I just get the Manfrotto. What's the name of them? It's the light compact
512.
Yeah,
or whatever
they hold up super small. It's nice and portable. They're not heavy. I don't have the what's it called? Not the air loaded ones, but I don't have those ones that are
the air cushioned.
Yeah, I don't have those ones.
Yeah.
They'd be nice at some point, but the ones I get, I think they're like $80 or $60 or something. They're not very expensive.
Yeah.
So
and you're not putting much weight on top of the stand anyway with the speed light, so the air cushion doesn't really for studio lights, they're great, right? But for just a speed light, you don't have to worry so much. So you're not like carrying a lot of weight on the head of the light stand. I have some of those too. I find they're sometimes not tall enough. That's the only thing I wish. Sometimes there's
mine go. I think, what do they go up to? Maybe is it 10 feet they go up to?
Yeah, about there. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I bought. I have a few of those, and then I just recently bought a cheetah stand.
Oh, you did, eh?
Yeah, and cheetah stand makes these great. It's an air cushioned one. It's not very heavy, and it actually folds down pretty small. But the cool thing I like about it is it's got legs that when you pick it up, the legs just retract.
Oh, that's
They're
nice.
And then when you set it down, the legs fold back out.
Right.
They're awesome. So you can just, if I need to move it, I just pick it up, legs collapse, move it, drop it, pop it down. So they're really, really good stands.
That's very cool.
They're about $80, $90 US. So with shipping, the US to Canadian dollar conversion right now, and then duty and everything else,
$1,000 or so.
About something like that. Yeah. So for those who aren't in Canada listening to us, our dollar is not performing very well right now.
Right.
I saw a post the other day on Facebook, and it said, "Look, the new U.S. quarter," and it was
right.
What was it? It was the new American 50-cent piece or something, and it was the Canadian $1 coin. So, not doing well.
Yeah, nice.
But I love that stand. It's really good. And then I have a couple of bigger air cushion light stands that I use with my studio lights.
Yep.
But I use those because I like those because they're tall. They go up to I think about 16 feet. So I can really get a light up high if I need it.
Right. Yeah, I use also in addition to that, I've got 2 sets. Well, I guess I got a whole bunch more than 2, but the Honol like the Velcro strip and all the modifiers that you can have with the Honol stuff. And again, these are just things I've been doing the same off-camera flash setup for probably 7 years now. I bought all this stuff back then, and I just haven't had a need to change. There's some great companies now, like MagMod, make some amazing products.
Yeah, I know, like Larry and Lanny and Erica from Two Man, they use the MagMod system, and it's really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. But and even from that, there's more. I think even some of the other like companies will have other versions of it. But basically, just what MagMod does, what Honel does, again, very similar purposes. It just lets you, with Honel, I have a Velcro strap that goes on the head of every one of my flashes, so I can use barn doors, I can use grids, I can use like filters on the flash itself or gels, I guess, rather. So I can use all kinds of different accessories on it just to kind of help shape and move the light around a little bit.
Yeah, kind of modify it or get creative with different lighting and whatnot.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of that stuff too. Again, I've probably over the years accumulated a whole bag full of different doodads and thingamajigs, and I have everything from the Gary Fong's light diffuser to I've got some Westcott diffusers. I've got some of the Honel product. I haven't picked up the MagMods yet. I only learned about them. I think last year was the first time that I really saw them. They're cool. They're basically like a rubber. They rubberize. They wrap around the head, and then they have magnets in them, and then you can attach the different modifiers to the front very easily with the magnets. So it's kind of a cool system. For these for the Godox lights that I have now, I mainly use, I have a nice softbox that goes on it. That screws in, and then there's some just some reflectors that go on, or I have a number of umbrellas. I also have some brackets so I can mount these and use all my studio softboxes as well. So cool. I don't generally bring those with me on a wedding day. It's more umbrellas and the softboxes, or just the bare reflector. And then I'm just bouncing flash, but that's kind of what I typically bring with me. So it's the light stand, the light, an umbrella bracket to mount it to the stand, and then I have some clips that I use to mount and hook the battery pack onto the flash. Because one of the things when I first got these, as I was just kind of hanging the battery packs off of the stand, and eventually the cords got kind of stretched, and then one of them got kind of broken. So eventually I bought some clips for like $10 that mount to the tripod or to the light stand, and then I could just hook the battery packs have a clip on the back, so I could just hook it, so that it took the pressure off the
that's cool,
the cables and stuff like that. So that's kind of our lighting rig, and we'll set that up, and again, we'll pull it out. We can pull it out any time of the day, family photos or at the reception or what have you, and pretty light. You can travel pretty quickly with it, and it's pretty easy to set up.
Well, I think that's one of the things, if I can maybe comment on the idea of portability, right? I mean, I've seen a lot of photographers over the years that kind of catch the off-camera flash bug, and then they kind of go all out and they get big soft boxes and this, and they get umbrellas and all kinds of big things. And then I'll see them like try it because it's new at the first couple weddings, and then they end up just giving it up because they're like, it's too much stuff to carry around, right? So like my take on that, again, just because I've been doing off-camera flash for basically my entire career as a wedding photographer for over 10 years now, I actually don't bring around a lot of modifiers. I literally will just have the flash in my little pouch beside, like in my I've got a low pro bag, or a think tank, sorry, and we'll just have it in there, and then we'll just kind of pull it out, and I'll bounce it if I can, or I'll just do direct flash or anything like that. But for me, on a wedding day, and obviously it's TWiP weddings, so we're talking a lot about weddings, it's more about portability and ease of use, ease of setup, and speed than it really is about anything. I mean, sure, I would love to bring around a giant, 8-foot softbox and all these things and, whatever. But if it takes me 10 minutes to set it up, for me and for my style of photography, that's not really contributing to the customer experience for me. So for me, it's more about portability. I guess, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm the same way too. Like you, when I kind of first delved into this and got into it, I wanted to bring the kitchen sink, and have everything. But it just takes forever to set it all up, and the longer it takes to set up, just people get tired of waiting around for you to get. And in the meantime, the moment's gone, and kind of the energy is lost out of the group, right? So now we'll bring what we need to light the reception. I always like to have at least 3 lights with me. Sometimes I like the 3-point lighting at receptions, but also, worst case scenario, if one of those lights goes down, I can still function just fine with 2 lights. I know I can comfortably light a reception with 2 lights, so I always have that backup. But during the day, when we're moving about and going location to location or doing family photos, we usually just have the 1 light It's all ready to go. It's on a
Yeah.
stand, all
Yep.
connected, ready to go. Usually an umbrella. And then typically, because I'm shooting with my wife, usually she's there to assist and help with the lighting,
Right.
holding it if it's a windy day so that it
Right.
doesn't blow away in the wind. You know, so it's good to have an assistant. I think if you're going to get into that, it's helpful if you have an assistant. It's
Yes.
definitely a little more work if you're trying to do it all yourself and
Yeah.
do off-camera flash, because then you have a little bit more to worry about. And you know, so you want to keep light and nimble. So yeah, we just have everything all set up on one of those stands and good to go. So we can just grab it out of the car and away we go.
Yeah.
Plus I'm getting older and I don't like carrying.
Yeah.
My back can't take care.
Plus, how many flashes have you forgotten laying around? I know I've done that many times when it's just me putting off camera flashes around, and I'll like leave the park or whatever, and I'll be like, "Oh, I forgot a flash behind the tree that I left there."
Yeah, I haven't forgotten a flash,
Oh,
but
no?
for the first time this year at New Year's, when I second shot a New Year's Eve wedding, I left an umbrella behind. I forgot it.
Oh, really?
We took it down partway during the reception, and I laid it on the floor.
Right.
And then I don't know, I just didn't see it in the dark and grabbed the light to pack up at the end of the night and forgot the umbrella. Realized it the other week. I went to unpack stuff and I was like, I'm missing an umbrella. I was like, I know exactly where I left it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh well, it's a $15 umbrella. Not gonna sweat it too much.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so we try to keep fairly light and nimble.
Cool.
So what about at receptions then? So how do you set it up typically at receptions? Do you set up 2, 3, 4 lights? Depends on the venue, I'm guessing. Or
yeah, it totally depends on the venue. My opinion on this, in fact, it's really interesting. I taught a workshop 2 years ago, it was 4 hours, just about reception off camera flash. And we actually did it in a venue. So it was really fascinating because we actually lit it as if we were the guests at the wedding.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, really it's you have to look at the size of the room, right? I mean, if it's a small room, you're obviously going to need less flashes. I don't like to overpower the room, but also I like to set up my flashes at the beginning of the night, before people are in there and things are happening, where I can basically blanket the room with the same quality of light regardless of where I'm photographing in the room.
Yep.
And that way, when speeches are happening, I can be shooting speeches, and then if someone cries or if someone comes out and does like an air guitar for one of the games or anything like that, I can just move around very nimbly without having to like change things and adjust settings and chimp on my camera, that kind of thing. So I like to be very quick and on my feet, and so I usually blanket the room with many flashes so that I can shoot anywhere. And I do that. Usually I'm around like minimum of 3 flashes. I've done up to 5 flashes on some of the bigger halls if there's like a 300 or 400 person wedding, where I've got to reach a far distance on it. But I set them up on stands on the edges of the room, and I use barn doors and I point them towards the ceiling to get some bounce off the ceiling and then back down. And I sort of look at it like you can look at the sort of angle of reflection and say, well, if it hits up that way, it's going to bounce back down this way. And I'll kind of set it all up that way. And I use the barn doors at the bottom so that there's no spill coming directly from the flash hitting anybody, which will then create really harsh shadows. Instead, I want that soft light coming off of the ceiling and bouncing down. So that's how I set up off camera.
Nice. Yeah, we do something similar. I'll go in and kind of assess the room. A lot of times, the first things I'm looking for is where can I put the lights that they're not going to be in the way.
Right.
That's usually the first kind of challenge is finding a spot where they're not going to get tripped over. One little tip is I like to bring bungee cords. And if I can, if there's something that I can secure the light to, I will use bungee cords to try to secure the light. Because inevitably, I don't know if you've experienced this, but no matter where you put a light, you can put it in the farthest corner of the room where nobody else is. And that automatically becomes the place where everybody goes and gathers. It's like a light. They're like moths. They just gather, especially children. Nothing makes me more nervous when I'm at a reception and just all the children are like playing the chase game around my light stand. I'm like, give me the heebie-jeebies. But so I usually try and find a place where it's going to be out of the way, but still be, giving me that broad light across the whole room. So no matter where the action's happening, I know that I can I've got an area covered. Yeah. I like to light I figure out where's the podium. Yeah. Where are they going to be speaking? And then which way are the bride and groom and the bridal party going to be looking? And I like to put a light off to the side, kind of almost behind as a bit of a rim light. Okay. Behind them. Right. So that there's again, a bit of separation, a bit of, just adds a little bit of drama to, and then, more forward light on where the speakers are going to be at the podium. And then I might adjust my lighting later, maybe at the dance floor. I might turn things a little bit or move them slightly for the dance, depending on what the room is set up and like. But that's what we typically use. Usually a 3-light setup, 2 to 3 light setup.
I think the most important thing in all this is like you're looking at, it's not just like you're kind of jumping in, throwing a flash up, hitting the ceiling and hoping that it does the right thing. It's like you're looking at the room. I do the same thing, right? It's like I've learned over the years that I can walk into a room and then quickly assess just because I've done it so many times. And a lot of the venues I'm going to the same place too, so I'm familiar with them. But it's really about getting in, assessing the light, assessing where people are. I also always look at like where are the most important tables, which is usually the family of the bride and groom. I want to make sure that I've got really good quality of light there because I want some great reaction shots of grandma, of mom and dad, of things like that. So it's about getting in and being intentional about how you're setting up your lighting so that you're going to get the best shots you can in the moment. And so you don't have to think about the light, but instead you can just be in the moment.
Yeah, and we do all our test shots, so we have all those outtake photos of me or my wife, me at the podium smiling or in the middle of the dance floor doing your pretend fake dance. We've all got those photos, right? But we'll map all that out ahead of time and know that okay, for dance we need it here, and this is the power. And again, like you say, when you're at similar venues, you get comfortable and you get used to where to light it, or you learn, right? You learn the next time. Okay, I'm going to light it a little different because this didn't work or that didn't work, right? So and then you I think the more you do it, you just become more comfortable with it. And then it just becomes just a natural thing. When you walk into the room, you sort of have a good idea. Just like when you first started in photography, you didn't probably understand aperture and, shutter speed and ISO, right? And now it's just second nature. Hopefully it becomes second nature and you don't have to think about that. You can focus on the moment. The same thing I find with off-camera flash. Those first couple of times you're thinking about it, but you want to practice as much as you can before. If you're going to start getting into this, don't leave it till the wedding day to experiment, I think, or you'll probably not be happy with your results. So definitely experiment and do all that before you actually get into a real wedding situation. I guess there's a lot of stuff we could probably talk about in terms of settings and things like that, but that'll probably take us down a whole other rabbit hole. What about just on-camera flash? Are there times when you use on-camera flash? And if so, kind of how do you get the best quality from that?
Yeah, totally. I use it actually for the dancing after the first dances.
Okay, it's kind of the party photos.
The party dancing, I do use that because for my typical reception lighting, it brings a certain brightness to the entire scene, right? Because I want to be showing environment, I want to be showing emotions, things like that. Whereas for me, for the dancing shots, the party dancing shots, I want that kind of darkness, that sense of chaos. I want to see the lasers and the lights from the DJ booth coming through, and kind of want to separate the busyness on the dance floor from the subject, the person I'm photographing who's on the dance floor. If I lit everyone the same, I would see 20 heads in the shot, whereas I would kind of want to more see just one shot, or one head rather. So I use on-camera flash, but I bounce it. So I usually I'm either bouncing to the left of me or to the right of me, depending on where I'm at in the room, if whatever wall's I guess kind of closest to me. And if there's not a wall that's close to me, then I'll bounce kind of backwards around 40 degrees behind me that way. And I usually use that on TTL. So I'll usually shoot around 1/60th of a second, usually around f2.8 if I'm using a 2.8 lens, or 1.8 if I'm using like a 1.4 lens, or f2. And then I'll use the TTL on usually minus like 1 1/3 stop. And that way it's not overpowering. It's not very like deer and headlighty, but it just kind of creates that nice little glow around the person I'm photographing. It'll give some direction if I'm hitting the walls beside me or if I'm hitting backwards. But then that 1/60th of a second will still introduce the lasers or the lights that the DJ has, some of the lights off in the background, the scones on the walls, things like that, so that I can kind of pull in some of that darkness, some of that warmth into those party shots.
Right. Yeah, that's what I do too. And so for those who are getting, kind of new to this, basically the first thing you want to do is you want to establish your ambient exposure. Right. That's where a lot of people get confused, is once you introduce flash, you're essentially introducing 2 separate exposures. And so your camera is going to give you your the ambient exposure. So you want to expose for the room, again, like Brian mentioned, the DJ lights or the wall lights, or if they've got those really nice big twinkle lights, or a lot of venues now are doing those older style filament type bulbs. They look kind of retro and cool. You want to draw all that in. So that's what you're exposing for first in camera. And then your flash is what's going to then add the light and expose your subjects. And that's, again, a great example of where you might use the TTL features. And that's when I would pop a flash on my camera too, typically is during that party time and catch some of the party stuff as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, so very good. One thing to keep in mind, if you are bouncing your flash, keep in mind color casts can play a role. I know we have a couple of venues in the city here that have like wood brown roofs that they're fairly low. And so if you bounce off those, everybody's orange.
Right. And I actually love that. Not the orange look, but I love, there's a few venues here that are like older barns and that kind of thing where you'll get a super warm bounce if you use it. And so I photograph everything that I do in Kelvin white balance. So I'll bring down my Kelvins. There's some venues here where I have to end up shooting at like 2,900 Kelvin, which is like crazy, crazy cool. But what that does is it makes the subject a proper color temperature. It makes everything else around them kind of go cool, which actually has this really, really cool party feel to it. So sometimes that looks cool. Sometimes if it doesn't look right, then I'll just put a gel on my flash when I'm bouncing it.
Right. Yeah. Or black and white. Always works.
Or black and white. Yes.
Always works well.
Turn a black and white color creative. You're good to go.
That's right. Yeah. Crappy light, black and white. Awesome. Good stuff. Well, hopefully that gives our listeners a bit of an insight into off-camera flash and how we work with it on the wedding day. Certainly, if you have additional questions, feel free to send us a question. And if you'd like us to go in depth in a particular topic on a future episode, let us know. We'd be happy to do that. Ask a question on Facebook.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, you've taught. I know you've done an entire course on off-camera flash. Right.
I teach a weekend workshop here.
Right. So I mean, you probably have 20 hours of content that obviously we just squeezed into 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I've done longer workshops. And like I said, I did a whole 4-hour reception workshop and we just hit on it in 5 minutes. If anyone has questions, wants us to go deeper, wants us to, wants to clarify something, like jump on over to the Facebook page. Let's get some discussion started over there. And so if you want to kind of bounce around ideas, get input, ask us to clarify anything, I think that would be a really great place for our listeners to go and ask us to dig a bit deeper into areas they want us to dig deeper.
Yeah, cool. And maybe I'll talk to Dave and Quinn, and maybe we can get them on at some point in a future episode and talk to them about how they do that. Because again, everybody's different in how they do it, right? Just like every photography technique, the way people work with off-camera flash is very different. So it'd be great to see maybe we can get them on in a future episode. So
awesome.
Very good. All right, let's move on quickly then to our listener question and our picks of the week segments, because I've got a few minutes and then I got to buy Sting and Peter Gabriel tickets go on sale in a little while. So I was pretty excited when he's coming to town. So let's answer a listener question. We haven't done one for a little bit. So this week, each week we choose a listener question to answer on the show, or at least we try to every week. This week we got a question from Dave, and Dave says, and it's very timely. He said he recently took a workshop and was told that every photographer should own a light meter and know how to use it. Do you use light meters on the wedding day? And if so, which one do you use and when do you use it?
I use the light meter of my eye.
The light meter of your brain?
Horrible answer. Listen, I think light meters have their place. I think they definitely have their place today in a industry where we so quickly just rely on the fact that we use digital cameras to as a bit of a crutch. I think a lot of photographers do that. And so I think having a light meter so that you can understand what's happening with light and what's happening with exposure and what makes sense to learn these things, I think is really, really useful. I also think that eventually over time, once you become comfortable and familiar with photography, a light meter is perhaps less useful. And I also say that very hesitantly, because I know that light meters have a huge place in studio photography. So I guess depending on what you're doing, but being that this is This Week in Weddings, I would say that to have a light meter with you on a wedding, for me and for my style of shooting, which is very fast paced and very quick and very photojournalistic, it just doesn't make sense because things are moving and changing so quickly on a wedding day. For me to constantly go and do light meter readings would just be kind of difficult. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm this, I think I probably share the same sentiment as you. I definitely think a light meter is an important thing to know about and to understand. it's a part of my class when I teach both studio lighting and off-camera flash, and I introduce light meters and get the students working with them. Again, more so that they can start to understand what is the light doing.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things that can be confusing is particularly once you start getting into multiple lights. Like if you're just using one light, yeah, you can take the shot, chimp, look at the back of your camera,
Right.
And adjust accordingly and maybe get by without a light meter. But as soon as you start getting into multiple lights, that's where it can start to get a little bit more tricky.
Right.
And if you really want to know and have a good understanding of what's going on, I think knowing how to use a light meter will help.
Yeah.
Do I pull one out on a wedding day? No, but I have it in my bag if I need it for some reason. But again, like you, after years of doing this stuff, you get to be pretty good at judging it and reading it. You get to know your lights very well and the power output of them. So it's not critical, but I would say if you're just getting started, or if you're doing, I still pull it out when I'm doing studio work. If I'm lighting stuff and I'm in the studio, and it's just, for me, it helps me get to the end result a lot quicker and more efficiently, particularly if I'm under a time crunch. I'm shooting a CEO or something like that, and I've only got 10 minutes to get my lighting dialed in and set up. I don't have time to fumble around and look and adjust and look and adjust and look and adjust and take 10 test shots. I need to be able to say, he walks into the room, the second shot, first or second shot's got to be, okay, we're going to start making magic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll use a light meter in that situation. I know other photographers like Zach and Jody Gray, they like to work with the light meter a lot during the day and even on a wedding day. But again, they're probably so experienced at it now. I don't know how much they would still do it day to day, because they probably know their stuff pretty well and have a pretty good feel for it. But I know when they're teaching stuff, they often will incorporate the light meter. So I think it's an important thing to know and to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you need to have it on the wedding day? Probably not, but it's good to have one and to know how to use it, I think.
Exactly. Yep.
So, and as far as a model, I mean, the Sekonic L358 is kind of the oldie but a goodie.
The industry standard.
Never let me down. There's fancier ones out now. They're touch screen and all this stuff. And have you ever used any of those ones that go on your iPhone?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't tried them either. They're like $20-$30. I don't know how good they'd be, but hey, if you got extra $20-$30 burning a hole in your pocket, give one a try and let us know how it goes. But yeah, you can get one of the Sekonic L358s for a couple $100.
Cool.
I always tell my students, wait till like April when the photography students graduate from the local college, and there's usually 3 or 4 of them on Kijiji. So excellent. Well, hopefully that answered Dave's question. And of course, if you have a question for us, just head on over to thisweekinphoto.com. You can ask us a question by leaving a comment on the blog post, or send us a question on Facebook, or email us at twipwed@thisweekinphoto.com. All right, let's wrap things up with our picks of the week. So each episode, we will share a photography-related item that we think would benefit wedding photographers. Our picks can be anything as long as they are somehow related to photography or the business of photography. And yes, sometimes we do stretch that, but that's okay. Brian?
Yes.
What have you got for us?
I'm so excited to talk about this because I've been waiting a long time to talk about it. Since the later part of 2015, because as listeners probably know, I'm a Fuji X photographer. I
not an X photographer,
like not like an X, like EX, but like that's what they call their ambassador, their sponsored photographer.
They should rethink that. That doesn't.
They probably
doesn't roll. I'm an X photographer.
When you say it, it kind of it's a little bit weird. But Fujifilm sent me a pre-production X Pro 2 camera.
Ooh, I was reading about this the other
all
day.
secretive, and I had to put black tape around it and everything because no one could see it. And I got to photograph it with it for a month and a half, 2 months, with very early version of the firmware, and like it's again lots of tweaks and stuff they've made since I had my pre-production model. I just had to send it back yesterday, which is really sad, but I'm definitely going to be picking one up because it was an amazing camera. For anyone that the Fujifilm X Pro 1, which is their first sort of entry into the market with the X series, was the sort of it was like their flagship camera, right? It was a rangefinder style body. It was nice and big. It was beautiful. Like big when I say it wasn't as big as an SLR, but it was a nice feeling body, and a lot of people really connected with it. But it's like, I think 5 years old or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, about four or five. Yeah.
It took a while, and you know, since then they've released the Fuji X-T1, and they had done the Fuji X-E1, the X-E2, the X100s, and they had never touched the X Pro line. And a lot of people are super loyal to the X Pro line because it's a rangefinder style body, and it's a bit bigger than the smaller X-E2 and the X-E1.
Yep.
So it's a great body. It makes beautiful images, and they really listened to photographers in making this. In fact, it was really interesting for me because last fall of 2014, Fuji flew me down to New York to have a meeting with the Fujifilm Japan team to brainstorm about this camera. And they had a bunch of mock-ups. They had a bunch of different ideas they wanted to hear about us X photographers and what we have to say about it. So I got to have input on the X Pro 2 and some of the ideas that we had and all that. And they totally listened to us based on what photographers are looking for. Little idea that they had is on the back of the X Pro 2, there's now a little joystick to choose the focus point. So instead of trying to use the thumb pad to, like, you know, click next or you know, up, down, left, or right, it's a little joystick, and it's really easy to use to choose your focus point. So little things like that that make your life easier and the workflow simpler when you're photographing are really useful and helpful. So yeah, I loved the X Pro 2, and that is without a question my pick of the week.
Excellent, very nice. Yeah, I was just we covered them on TWiP this week.
Cool.
And which hasn't aired yet, but will, and that was one of the topics. And so I was doing the research for that show. I was reading all the new announcements from Fuji, and it's like, ooh, I had an X100 at one point in time. And I really liked it. It was a beautiful little camera, and it was my goal of it was going to be my like pack around travel camera, my pocket camera.
That's what I use mine for.
And then it wasn't getting much love, unfortunately. I wasn't finding myself using as much as I thought I would end up using it. It sat on the shelf a little bit, and I eventually ended up selling it just because I just wasn't using it enough. But I really liked it. It was a great camera. I just, again, wasn't using it enough to justify, you know, keeping it on the shelf.
For me, I use my Fujis like at weddings. Like I use them in my work. I use it for probably 70 to 80% of my wedding work. In fact, something I'm like, my not claim to fame, but I'm super excited about this. But I photographed the first wedding in North America with the X Pro 2. That was kind of cool. I photographed it back at the beginning of December, and I brought it. And it was kind of risky because it was a very early version of the firmware. And it was a pre-production model, so it did freeze sometimes and that kind of thing. But I took a risk, and I loved the images I made with it. So it was kind of fun. Yeah.
Excellent. That's exciting. Yeah, there's some exciting stuff coming out. I'm waiting to see what Canon's got up their sleeve. I'm hoping, my fingers are crossed. I'm hoping Nikon just released the D5, and the specs on that looked amazing. And then the price on that came out, and
that looks amazing.
It's amazing with the US dollar exchange again. So I don't know. We'll see. Canon's supposed to be announcing a follow-up to the 1DX. So we'll see, and probably a 5D Mark IV, I would expect sometime soon. So we'll see. Wait and see what they've got up their sleeve.
Awesome.
Anyways, good pick. Well, my pick is sort of related to today's topic a little bit. So back last year when I was at WPPI, I ordered the new version of the Ice Light. So Jerry Guionis's invention, the Ice Light. Version 2, I picked it up and finally got it last August. They had some production and some shipping issues, so it took some time to get it in my hands. So I missed a good chunk of wedding season using it, but I finally got it in August last year. And it's a pretty cool light. It's no pun intended. It's daylight balanced, but it's very handy. It's a portable light. It's a constant light. It's got power levels. You can dim it. It's fairly bright. And it works good. We're using it a lot now to shoot details. So we'll pull it out because it looks like a lightsaber. So it looks cool and kind of badass to begin with. But we can pull it out, and it draws a lot of attention. People ask about it. It's a fantastic selfie light. So when people, like, I'll have it on me, and when I see people off doing selfies somewhere, I'll go, hey, let me help you out. And I'll pull this thing out, and I'll light the people, and they'll be like, oh my God, the light's amazing. Thank you so much.
You have to make the sound effects too. It's like,
yeah, it's pretty cool. So it works good for that. The first place I took it to was down to a destination wedding in Mexico, and they had their reception outdoors at night. And obviously we were traveling. We didn't have a lot of off-camera flash, so it worked perfect to light up, the party shots and stuff like that. So it was really, really good. Awesome. I love the Ice Light. So it comes with us. It's in our bag. It's one of our tools in our toolkit that we'll pull out and gives us some good light. So that's
Awesome.
the ice light. Again, we will link to all the pics and things we talked about in the show notes for this episode.
Sweet.
And I guess that brings us to the end of another episode. We've reached the end. It's the end, Brian. What will we do?
Oh no.
We want to, thank our listeners and our sponsors for their support, and of course, remind you, send in your questions and comments for the show. What have you got coming up in the next little while, and where can people go to find out what you're up to?
Well, we guess depending on when this goes live, but we Sprout Studio will be exhibiting at WPPI this year, which is going to be pretty exciting.
Very cool.
We will be I'm speaking at WPPI. I'm speaking at Shutterfest coming up in April.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also exhibiting at Canada Photo Convention in Vancouver.
Excellent.
And then I'm speaking again in Toronto at the Canada Photo Convention. So got a couple little educational things happening there. As always, we've got sproutingphotography.com, which is our educational hub for everything to do with the business of photography. And we have Sprout Studio still running, and we have a New Year's promotion still running right now. Hopefully by the time this goes out, it's still on. But for anyone that's interested, they can use the coupon code Fresh Start Monthly to save 20% off their first 3 months of Sprout Studio.
Fantastic. And if people are looking for your fabulous photography work, and
find me as a photographer.
You as a photographer.
bcapphoto.com, BCAP photo.com. There's 2 P's in there.
Awesome. Good stuff. Again, we'll link to all those great sites.
Sweet.
In the blog post, so people can find you and follow you and stalk you on Instagram and all that good stuff. Good stuff. Well, if you're looking for me, I too I'm going to WPPI next. That's the next thing I've got coming up. Working on a styled shoot right now at the Ice Castles. Nice. So they've built the Ice Castles in Edmonton this year. It's a really cool location, and so we've got a great team we put together. We've got florists and designers and guys in suits and gowns and all kinds. So we're doing a nice styled shoot in coming up soon. WPPI, and then I'm also going to be at CPC, Canada Photo Convention, coming up in April in Vancouver, so that's going to be fun. And then it's wedding season. Basically, we'll kick in.
That's when we hibernate.
Yeah, that's when we come out of hibernate. We're like bears. We kind of, we're sitting around getting fat and chubby right now, and then we'll come out of hiding and begin shooting. So looking forward to that. So
cool.
So, and if you're looking for me, you can find me over at my website, which is momentsindigital.com. And all the social networks, I'm at Bruce Clark with an E at the end of Clark. And again, be sure to visit our website at thisweekinphoto.com for this show and all the other great shows on the TWiP network. Thanks again for listening to TWiP Weddings, raising the bar one wedding at a time.